right. Yeah, well, welcome everyone. And today we're going to chat about the biggest hyper casual trends in 2021, which is super exciting. We have a great lineup with us here today. And let's start with some introductions by everyone. Sammy, you're the first one on mine. Could you start?
Sure. Hey everyone, so Sammy here. I'm in charge of the business development and market intelligence team at Ketchapp. The role of my team is mainly to find external studios to partner with on the long run, as well as to analyze the market trends and the evolution of the hyper casual market. So that's why I'm here, I guess.
That sounds like a super cool job. And what about you, Ivan?
Yeah, hey everyone. Name's Ivan or Ivan, whatever. I'm the CEO of Highcore Games, and I can see that I'm actually surrounded by publishers, and we don't publish games. Well, at least as of yet, we're developing games. So I guess I'm going to be the alternative opinion here. But yeah, we're focused on hyper casual and mid-core games. So yeah, we quite experienced in game dev. So that's it.
I think that's really good to have some different opinions here. It'll be very exciting. What about you, John?
Hello again, everybody. Hey, everyone. I'm John. I'm the CEO of BoomHits. So we've been incubated by BoomBit, so actually very similar to Ivan. So BoomBit are a developer, about 10 years old, a lot of experience in IP games, like, Hunt Royale's out now, a lovely mid-core game. But 8 months ago, we kind of broke cover. We're a free-to-play developer and publisher. Already had 8 published games, nearly 50 million downloads. Very different model. We only work with 10 studios, only on fixed monthly payments, and we've also just closed 2 studio investments. So I'm really excited to announce one of those this month. So yeah, we can dive into that on this panel.
That sounds super interesting. We'll love to hear more about that later. And what about you, Anton?
Hey everyone, I'm Anton. I am a head of developer partnerships at SayGames. So obviously my job is to attract and retain our development studios, our partners that we work with, as well as help them reach their goals with regards to going live with their games as a producer.
That sounds super interesting. All right, sounds like we have a great crowd here. Should we just dive into it?
What about you, Riley? Aren't you going to do some sort of intro for yourself?
I guess, yeah, sorry. Yes, I'm Riley. I'm the CEO of Umami Games, and we are also not a publisher yet, just like Ivan. We make hyper-casual mobile games. We scaled a game called ABC Runner in January. So in 2021, we have entertained more than 10 million people. We are currently 7 people. And just as John says, we are also thinking that self-publishing is very interesting down the road and looking a lot into the preparations about that. And for me personally, I think it would be super interesting maybe to start with maybe a small market recap of how do we see the trends have changed over the last couple of years. And it could be in both. I mean, because for me personally, I think it kind of seems like we could both talk about game design, ad strategy, and more like the business models behind it. I know, for example, John, you also already mentioned something with the business models changing and something else coming up. How do you see the markets have changed over the last couple of years?
I mean, I think the hugely positive thing is that hyper casual just continues to get bigger and bigger, right? Both at an audience level, it's just a math equation, right? The number of people that have got mobile devices coming into gaming, and hyper casual is just that natural entry point, and the number of people coming to that entry point is getting bigger and bigger, right? But what that means for all of us though is that I think the way that you have to approach these games is changing, because people's expectations, the more they play hyper casual games, is evolving, right? And you have to make your own decisions on perhaps where they go next. But as a result, we've seen, and are seeing this amazing fusion of game genres. So I mean, I don't really worry too much about labels. The way that we design games is we're very focused on LTV and ARPU, right? For me, sort of chasing low CPIs is for me fast becoming a zero-sum game that is dominated by 4 or 5 key players. So I think that business model is really locked in there. I think for this next generation of free-to-play games and hyper-casual, it's really exciting, because if you free yourself of the label, there's so many great examples in the charts now of games that have got almost like casual. They look like a casual game, but they've got a lovely, simple sort of hyper casual core loop. They're not, they've got like 10-15% IEP in them, but they still have ads. So I think we're just seeing, now some amazing innovation of this next wave of free to play games that absolutely does involve hyper casual. But of course, now the business model does have to change, because if you're not chasing low CPIs, the question then is, what are you then chasing, and how do you build your whole development, publishing process, testing process, creative strategy to actually drive towards profitable games? Let's say ARPU day 7 $1. That's a very different business model to building an entire studio or publishing business to chase 20-cent CPIs. So that's my very high level view on where we're at.
I think that's super interesting insights, and it would be super interesting to hear whether some of the other publishers, and let's also speak to Ivan or somebody. What about you, Sammy? Is that some of the same thoughts you have about the market, or do you do things differently at Ketchapp?
No, I mean mainly I agree with what John just said. In very short, maybe I would say that the hyper casual market is maturing. Like there's been this huge download growth. Now it's slowing down a bit. Competition remains very, very intense. Breakthrough innovation seems to be more difficult to achieve on the regular field of the low CPI chase, John mentioned. So I don't think at all it means the end of the market. It's just the natural way of this market to evolve. It's been here for 7 years already, so I think it's completely normal. It's not a blue ocean anymore. It hasn't been for a while already. But I think that what's really interesting is to see how all the actors, both publishers and studios, are trying to react, to adapt themselves, and from a strategic point of view. So how ad strategy evolves towards more TikTokable than ever trends, how games content continues to become richer, let's say, how the monetization strategy becomes smarter too, more subtle. We've seen clever than ever RV placements. We've seen more EAPs too. The fact that also from a studio and a publisher perspective, we're seeing beyond this low CPI chase, let's say, with maybe a more focus on profitability in general, maybe in opposition sometimes to a bit of visibility. Of course, if both can be combined, it's the best solution. But I mean, some of the recent games that we can tend to see as niche potentially, but that can generate some very interesting profits, are becoming more common. So yeah, I think that overall, the way we adapt to the market is really shaping its future, and that's really interesting to see.
I think that's some very interesting insights. Maybe we should jump to Ivan before we ask Anton, because is that the same? How big is your team? I'm just thinking of what you're saying with these niche games, and it's true, at least for us. So we're 7-8 people, and you don't. I mean, when you're not 200 people, you also don't need a giant amount of revenue. Is that what is your thoughts on the whole market change, Ivan?
Well, I think the entire point of the business is to try to gain as much revenue as you can, can't you? So, I mean, yeah, obviously, if you have 200 people, you have to make more money. But I mean, even with 7 people, 10 people, or around 65 people, as our team is now, we're still trying to get as much revenue as we want, as we can. So when it comes to the main question about the strategies that are new, I would probably also like to point out some sort of a new trend in advertisement, which is it is kind of intertwined with the gameplay. So it's called for example, in-play. It is right in the game. So for example, while playing the game, you can see the banner that is not something you can skip, but it takes the screen time. So you're playing, like in example, racing games, and then you will see like the banners there that are part of the surrounding, part of the background. So while passing it, you will see the actual advertisement. And I can see this trend is getting stronger and stronger. And even today, I think during the hyper casual conference, somebody already had developed the idea of this in-game advertisement, which has nothing to do with RVs or interstitials. It's like a whole different bunch of advertisement. Also, when it comes to business models, we in-house have adopted sort of hyper casual business model in our mid-core game. So currently we're actively using the hybrid monetization, what everybody is calling it right now. So currently in our main title in mid-core Tank Slot, hi BoomHits. In Tank Slot, we're currently split 50-50. And I would say this is the new trend for us, because previously it was almost only in-app purchases, or maybe like 10% in-app purchase. Only in-app purchase, so maybe like 10% advertisement in it. So yeah, I would say that. And finally, about game mechanics, I can see that the games become more sophisticated. Well, not only in quality, but when it comes to some sort of a meta. We can see more and more games coming out on the market. Like, for example, Good Job Games have recently launched Zen Puzzle, I think, which, well, according to Sensor Tower, Zen Match Relaxing Puzzle, which according to Sensor Tower has an ARPU above $1, which is quite decent for hyper casual or SayGames. I mean, Anton will tell more about it with Squad Alpha. So more and more games which are way more sophisticated are coming to the market, and I think this is great. I honestly think this is the best thing that can happen to hyper casual industry.
I definitely agree, because I think maybe, Ivan, I don't know whether I at least remember the times like 2 years ago where the only thing you strived for was like a CPI and a day one retention. And if you didn't hit it exactly to the metrics, that game was just out, right? And it seems like...
Well, I mean, it's still there. It's still there. Look how many runners are still there, and I'm pretty sure they still aim to get day one 100% ROAS. Mm-hmm. Those like runners with X5 minus 50, or runners with like narrative in it, where you have to make choices. It is still there. I can't believe that they have long-term retentions in the game. But sorry, I'm already taking too much time.
No, yeah, it's fine. Let's talk about what about from Anton? It sounds like you're also in the doing a little bit of midcore.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So it's kind of hard to look at the market within the 2 years change, because when we look at market, we look at what's changed in the last 2 days, right? So in 2 years has changed a lot. So the market has completely changed in terms of the audience, the competition out there, the way we look at the metrics, and the way we work with the teams and the games they produce, and what are the KPIs in terms of how the game is getting produced and is getting launched, and what are the key criteria for actually going live globally with the game. Because as you said, 2 years ago, everyone was grinding for 10 cents CPI, and a game being developed in a couple of weeks with as much content as you need for about 2-3 days engagement, and that's it, right? So nobody was looking at the long-term retention, nobody was looking at long-term engagement, etc. But now in the majority of games that we're testing right now, we don't even look at the CPI as a major criteria for picking a game for production. So the way we look at it is if we see a potential in terms of the actual product metrics, we see that there is around, I don't know, 10-20 minutes gameplay session for the first day. If we see that there's enough engagement in terms of ad consumption, etc., because we position ourselves as a publisher with ad-based monetization. So as long as we see those metrics, this is when we think, okay, so if there's a product, then we think we have a marketing team capable of finding a marketability for this title. Okay, and this is why the marketing teams are growing. This is why the motion production teams are growing. This is why we make hundreds and hundreds of creative for each game that we're testing and publishing globally, because when you have a product metrics, then you start thinking about how you are going to market the game, and not vice versa. So the CPI is not the key metrics anymore for any game to be out there and being successful.
I think that's super interesting. Kind of seems like it changed around, right? And I know, so this one might be a little off, but how much do you think the changes that Apple make with the SCAD network affects the way the markets have changed? Is that a big factor?
It certainly is a factor. So and since the two networks they work in a different way right now in terms of the acquisition and tracking and monetization, but that change will eventually come to Google Play as well, as we think, and as it was reported before. So it has its effect, absolutely. The publishers and developers' lives they haven't become better and easier since the introduction of the iOS 14.5. So certainly there is an effect, but the long-term effect the ripples are going to be kind of spreading around for years ahead. So it's very hard to tell what kind of effect in terms of the lost opportunity or revenues is we're seeing at the moment.
What about in general, guys? When you say like, so it seems like the markets have changed, right? We'd also have changed the products. You're talking about a bit deeper monetization, also talking about not starting with the CPI, but going more into that later. Have that changed the team sizes? For example, John, you mentioned that you guys invested in some studios. Like, does it have other requirements to the team size than it had before?
I wouldn't say necessarily the team size. I mean, we've got
skill sets maybe. Oh.
Yeah, I think. Well, yeah. I mean, I think it's really comes down to what we're all discussing here is like, well, now what is a hyper casual game, right? And if you're moving into IAPs, that is a very different skill set in terms of like UA, monetization, BI, A/B testing. It's not something you can just spin up overnight, right?
No.
So there are some people that again, Ivan has great experience in this at BoomHits. We've been doing this for 10 years. Casual mid-core games, it's a very different development process and also testing process. So I think if you're starting to think about those kind of games, maybe the requirement in the team is, you definitely need some very strong 3D artists. I think if you're going to step up out of hyper casual into, if you think about certainly anything sort of like Merge, Idle, even more casual, and you want to start playing around there. So I think definitely there. But yeah, from a tool set perspective, you're going to need some different tools in your armory if you want to compete on and start having a nice mix of IPs and ads. But yeah, studio size, I think that's the problem. Certainly in hyper casual, people can get very excited and are asking for lots of money because they want a 50-person team. And I always ask why. What is this correlation between 50 people and the profit you can make? Because for me, if you're just jumping to 50 people, that reaction is you're building a CPI prototype factory. So again, the question is, well, why are you doing that? Because I think there's more efficient ways to make profitable games. But yeah, definitely you're going to need some new tools if you want to start playing around with these sort of hybrid monetization games.
I think maybe we could take that one over to Ivan, because I think, did you mention you were 65 people in your team?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
How are those people divided, and how does that work? I agree. It seems like a big hyper casual studio, but also I would get with a lot of power then.
Well, with the only exception that we're not hyper casual only studio. We're still making mid-core games, and we sort of have like two companies united under one roof because we don't share resources between those two divisions. So basically, we have a fully staffed, well, if I can use this word, division, which is mid-core, which is currently working with Tanks a lot and two new titles, and the second division is hyper casual. It's the one that developed three hyper casual titles, which are now live. Two of them are published with SayGames, and we're also since we're self-publishing Tanks a lot, our mid-core game, and we're planning to keep publishing our mid-core games in the future. We also need marketing teams. So we have a business analytics team, we have marketing team, we have creatives team, which is quite big now. So yeah, since everything is now in house, it is kind of it's kind of crowded. Yeah, it feels like we have a lot of people now in the team because we've grown like almost 2 times during 2021, or maybe a bit longer time period. Well, during pandemics, let's put it this way. Yeah, so if that was the question, then I think I've answered it.
No, I think it's very interesting. I'm just wondering whether is that a trend too? Maybe you guys already mentioned also. So was it Ruby Games who teamed up with Rovio, and we've seen several of these acquisition. Or I'm not saying that SayGames acquired you, but it's like working together with the partners and like overlapping. What about you, Sammy, in your portfolio of studios? Do you see any of those overlaps as well in the teams?
Well, I mean, this is the natural direction of the market. You have on one side historically hyper casual centric actors who are trying to go to deeper games, and on the other side you have more traditional actors who are trying also to reach these huge audiences, these huge volumes that you have with hyper casual. So all the M&A, the fusions, the acquisitions that you've seen with big actors like Zynga and Volnykh, with Rovio and Ruby Games, these are the examples of, well, big companies traditionally doing casual mid-core games trying to reach out to these huge uh, amounts of potential players that have as an entry point to the video gaming industry hyper casual games. So for them, it's a way to compensate a bit the post iOS 14.5 era, let's say, and to re-enter the game to have in one house the capability to address all the players and to maybe transform previously hyper casual only players into maybe more casual players for the next steps. So yeah, it totally makes sense to have these these worlds, let's say, coexisting and slowly breaking a bit the frontier that was beyond them. And yeah, it's also a trend in terms of game content, I would say. Even if everybody is looking for deeper games, I would say, well, in the traditional hyper casual era, um, I would say that it doesn't mean that, and that's also something that Ivan said. Traditional hyper casual games with low CPIs, short-lived, they didn't stop existing, and there will still probably be these kind of games around, focusing on super viral trends, super short-lived. This will continue to exist, but it's also important, I guess. It's financial risk. You want to have on one, yeah. Let's just a question of diversification. You want the short-term project that can become very profitable in a short amount of time. You want to have those kind of long project, more ambitious, because it's also most of the time not the same requirements. I guess we all mentioned this, but you don't spend as much time on a hybrid slash mid-core game than you will do on a hyper casual game. So yeah, I guess this is very important to have the big picture. And we both have, I mean, traditionally hyper casual players and mid-core games creator, we both have to learn from the best from the other world, basically. So on classic, on let's say mid-core production, even though the way we work are quite different, and we see it at Ketchapp with the Ubisoft teams. Of course, projects are not based on same skills, don't require same teams, not require same budget, but we both have to learn a lot from the way the other side is working. Actually, it's especially true, for example, on the monetization and ad side, where mid-core game have a lot to learn from the hyper casual industry, and on our side, from an hyper casual point of view, we have also a lot to learn from the how to keep players engaged on the long run. So yeah, I think these are very like complementary, and yeah, that's the point of those acquisition.
I think that that's very interesting, how you kind of learn from each other, right? And I remember the same. So I used to work at Tactile, and we see a lot of those narrative ads in hyper casual now that almost look a bit inspired from how the free to play ads kind of looked at some point. But what about then? Let's say I was a new developer. I'm getting into this. And which kind, is there any genres Ivan, you mentioned runners as being more on we're chasing low CPIs, but what if I then want to make a more hybrid game or something that where I need to focus more on the LTV? Is there any sort of games or genres of games that are most likely to survive in that area? It sounds like runners might not be the best genre to go for.
Well, personally, and maybe inside of our studio, we're currently seeing the trend for so-called hyper-casual survivors to be something sort of a new trend. So I would probably target the team and the production, the producer, the game designer towards that direction. But it's like Anton said, it's like what happened, what will happen in 2 days, we don't know. Maybe the new Squid Game will launch on Netflix or on HBO, and everybody will go crazy around it, and we will have like 5 games to top 10 that are representing the games from Squid Game. So it is really hard to tell. But what I can definitely tell, and I can back Jean on that idea, is that for me the future of hyper casual is all about the team. It's not about the trend itself, or it's not about the CPI, because it is a team that has to have the opportunity to keep working with the game in the required speed to enable global launch. Because what we have right now on the market is the industry that is crowded with sort of independent studios, but that are working with paper prototype model. But they are not independent, obviously. They fully depend on the paper prototype model. And I'm pretty sure, and don't get me wrong here, but I'm pretty sure that 90% of those studios, provided they will find a good combo of CPI, LTV, and engagement, they won't be able to complete the game, to make the launch on the market. So for me, it's all about the team. It's all about the people we work with.
Well, we tried scaling a lot of different games, and yeah, it takes a couple of tries to become good at it for sure. But I'm just thinking, when we're talking about these meta layers, for example, in runners, we see a lot of these 2 or 3 buttons you can upgrade, for example, right? For me, that's kind of like an idle layer or like an idle inspiration. I'm just thinking, isn't there any meta layers that seem trendy here in 2021? Like now, I threw the buttons on the table. What about you, Anton or John? Is there any trends you see in monetization that have worked well for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you check out any of the BoomBit games, you can see the 3-button monetization. What I would say about it is it's very dangerous to say, oh, right, I just make a game, stick 3 buttons in, and I've got amazing LTV, right? I mean, if it was that simple, we'd all be retired. I think my advice would be, well, my perspective is, for our business model, the earlier you're thinking about like monetization and these RV upgrades as part of the idea itself and the level design, the higher chance you have of success, right? Because you want to ask yourself, can I play this game without needing to upgrade any part of my experience to enjoy it, to progress. And if you can, you have a fundamental design problem, right? So you want to try and architect these ideas, whether you want, sort of deep meta in it or not. That's how I would try and approach these games now, is just try and think about that player upgrade experience. Because if you feel like you're playing a game and you literally can't play it without upgrading, you're in a really nice really nice place. And in terms of like new trends, I mean, Ivan touched on one earlier. I'd say the other really exciting one is definitely audio. It's sort of in its infancy. There's a couple of great companies in this space, Audio Mob and Odeo already, that are raising funds. And I love this idea of like rewarded audio, right? And the concept is, or the problem is typically when you've got a rewarded video, you're kind of out of the gameplay for 30 seconds, right? And you can see quite high churn rates, that people just drop off and, welcome to hyper casual complaints with ads. So the idea is that actually you can go straight back into the game, depending on the category and sound on rates, but you're still playing the game with the ad actually playing as part of the game experience. So I think audio ads are going to be a huge part of, hyper casual games, but also mobile games moving forward to improve that ad ecosystem and balance.
That sounds super interesting. To be honest, I never heard about audio ads. It sounds like a very positive, and sounds like a trend is, someone also mentioned in-game ads, that there are coming more and more different monetization options and more native monetization options. What about you, Anton, in your games? Is there any trends you see lately that works well in your games when you're thinking about raising the long-term retentions?
Sure. Obviously, when we're talking about longer term retention, it's all about the game design systems that teams introduce in their games. You can't just have a character upgrade 3 buttons thing and slap it on top of any game. I personally produced a title which is now global, where we try to add this kind of meta to the game, where you sort of upgrade characters by choosing whatever power up you want to use and spend your coins or whatever. And that didn't work. That actually that decreased the overall metrics for the game when we launched the test. We have a different case with Race Master, which is one of our latest big hits in a racing genre, and that mechanic worked really well in that particular game, where it's in a racing genre. It's very natural to actually upgrade your car and make it better over time, and spend your time and effort on progressing within the game. And the point here is that it's very important to design these things when you start working on the game, rather than trying to add something on top of your core mechanic when the game is almost completed, and then you're fighting for another 1-2% points of your, I don't know, day 7 retention or something like that. So in most cases that is not going to work. And the best cases that we're seeing now in terms of our long-term retention is where these metas and systems being introduced into the core gameplay. So there is a new genre called idle arcade, where a whole game economy and a player progression and the kind of the game world progression is introduced into the core mechanics. So it's very easy for the bigger audience to understand this principle. So there is no a very sophisticated and deep meta somewhere beyond the core gameplay that you will have to learn and invest a ton of your money over time, a ton of your time and effort and money over time. So these simplified kind of RPGs mechanics that are being introduced to the games recently really help a lot to produce games that have a longer term retention, a much bigger time engagement for day 1, day 2, day 3, etc. A lot better ad consumption, especially when the rewarded videos are introduced as a point of interaction with the game world. So now ads are basically a part of gameplay rather than something that is that is being just introduced in between the levels as an interstitial that kind of make you churn from the game immediately. So those are the key kind of elements that we're seeing right now in terms of game design.
That's very interesting. I heard about the idle arcade before as well, and for me, it's funny. I played a lot of Roblox with my nephew, and they have that kind of idle mechanic, idle arcade thing as well, right? Where it's very visual and super interesting. So it seems like that there could be some trends, right? That might convey a bit more towards the deeper monetization. And then I also agree very much about the whole. I guess with all monetization needs to bring value for the players, right? You cannot just add it because you as a designer need it, right? I think there are some good examples. I think I mentioned it a lot in these talks, but because I was so inspired by it, there was this Finnish studio called Future Play, who made, it's been a while since they did it, but made these idle games where, as you guys say, like the rewarded bottoms were part of the core of the idle game. So you kind of felt like, it didn't feel like you watched an ad to see it, but it felt so natural, and getting that more and more in seems like very beneficial. What about you, Sammy? Did you mention any of the monetization trends you have been implementing lately in your games? Are they the same as the others?
Yeah, well, they mentioned, I guess, most of the most interesting one. Indeed, and as always, if you can feel like whether it's diegetically in the world of the game with the real existence for the character in game, or whether it's via some UI elements, UI panels, what matters is that, as you said, it brings value to the players. If the players see the monetization features as something that is interesting for him, then you've won. And that's something that we've tried recently in our games crowd defense, where you have indeed those in-level rewarded videos, meaning that they are really tied to what is happening on screen. For example, so it's basically a sort of hyper casual tower defense game, and as soon as you're in danger, for example, you have those kinds of pop-up of so it's you have a time limit, like you have 5 seconds, for example, some time pressure. You have 5 seconds to decide if you want to, for example, get this temporary boost where you will slow down the wave of enemies, which is too big to contain, or this kind of in-game elements. I guess if it's directly linked to a need for the player to actually being helped, or to that is to solve a challenge that he's facing in game, then this is where you succeed, and where the monetization feature makes the more sense, I would say.
I think that's super interesting. So it sounds like actually one of the biggest trends is that maybe a year, 2 years ago, remember when Archer came out, we all talked about this hybrid casual. And back then we talked a lot about it. But it seems like now people actually also started shifting into trying to use a lot of these free-to-play or casual features. Just because, Sammy, when you mentioned like a time restriction, for me, that's very tied into free-to-play games, casual games. Is that something you guys and using some of those features in new ways, right? And channeling them. Just thinking about sales psychology, it's always effective, right? To have a limited offer only for a certain amount of time, right? It's super interesting. But how about, guys, also on the ads? I know you said that the creatives is not as important anymore, but still, is there any trends we see in the creatives compared to earlier? Within the creatives? I don't know where to start. Yeah, Anton, you said, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't agree that creatives are not an integral part of your success anymore. Creatives still play a huge role in your overall success as a developer, publisher, and the product you're launching. And that is we're seeing the trend where it becomes harder and harder to market the game out there, because first of all, the number of ideas that being thrown against the wall on a daily basis is just staggering. There are so many developers right now trying and testing their ideas every day, and at the same time everything is a remix, right? So at the same time we're seeing a crisis of ideas where it's very difficult to come up with something new. Everything has been tried already, so it's very difficult to find a completely new idea and find another 10-cent CPI game at this point. So the competition is huge, and the ads production became much more sophisticated because you're not talking about just a video ad anymore. You're also talking about playable ads, static ads, banners. So playables becoming more and more sophisticated in terms of, so we have a completely different team working on actual playables based on the original game. So some of the assets obviously are going to be reused, but it's a completely new production. So the amount of creatives that we are producing for each game that we're launching is growing from game to from a product to product. So as I said, we're now creating hundreds of video ads, end cards, static ads, playables for every game that we're launching. So that means that there's a bigger team of people actually working on those creatives and finding new trends that can be applied for a particular product to improve its marketability. So creatives and ads are very difficult and still play a very, very important role in a successful product.
Just out of interest, Anton, where do you test when you have hundreds of creatives? Because back in the days, like Facebook iOS was the preferred platform for many publishers and developers, but it's not really working anymore in the same way, right? So where do you test your ads now? Has that changed as well, or do you test on Facebook or on TikTok or on ad networks to figure out which of the 100 ads then work the best?
So the common market knowledge and the way that everyone does this is everyone tests their prototypes on Facebook still, and it became harder, and Facebook is not an ultimate a decision-making point for your marketability anymore, because the CPIs have increased. It's not very stable anymore, and all the colleagues from the market they tend to say the Facebook is broken now somehow. So that has changed, but Facebook is still the #1 network to launch your prototypes on. And then when you see a potential for your product in terms of your product metrics and marketability on Facebook, this is when you decide, okay, now I'm gonna test on all of the other networks, because it's on Facebook. It's very easy to turn and off your campaign on different networks. It's hard to set it up, and it's hard to turn it off and turn it on. So it requires more time and effort to actually run those campaigns. So a soft launch for a particular title is always performed when you actually are very confident about your product metrics and you're on your way to actually launching a game globally. So it's a rare situation when you've launched on all the networks and then you decided, oh no, you're not gonna launch it anymore.
Yeah. And super interesting insights. And what about you, John? You mentioned that. Do you guys also make 100 ads for each game you wanna launch?
Yeah, I mean, again, it really comes back to what games you're making, right? So I agree with everyone. I think from a resource perspective, you need some confirmation of market appeal. But for me, if you're certainly making if your goal is to go for, let's say, $1 plus day 7, right? For me, that's perfectly doable, right? It might seem undoable if all you're doing is making runners because you've never seen an ARPU like that. But if you're making games like that, and you mention idle arcade, let's take that as an example, right? So I think there's two types of idle arcade. There's idle arcade, which is your sort of classic sort of hyper casual with, you know, like the beautiful colors that SayGames are renowned for, right? But you're still chasing a slight increment on a hyper casual ARPU. But actually, when you test these games, what you will see, if you've got the right tool set and mindset, is you're just making an idle game. I think idle arcade is, you know, it's just a very clever marketing term, but really what you're doing is making an idle game. And if you're making an idle game, then for me, CPI testing is a game design tool, right? It's not, I'm not doing it for CPI confirmation. I'm doing it for my game design team, because I need to go and buy 10,000 users to basically run through my game to look at where the pinches are, where the churn is, where the drop off is, to then go back into the design. And that's a really alien concept when you make hyper casual games, really, because it's all about speed. People are going to copy you, need to move really fast, test, put loads of networks in, scale. Oh, it didn't work, on to the next one. So I think it really comes back to your process. So, you know, yes, we do build lots of creatives, but increasingly we're just doing it really for game design, right? Once we have initial CPI confirmation, but it's not just CPI, right? You're looking at playtime. You know, playtime is really nice. For me, retention is interesting, but again, all of these, you know, playtime, CPI, etc. Really, if I have an indication of what I think ARPU is, it puts all of this in nice context, right? And then it directs the game. So yeah, everyone's got different tactics on where they test. You know, Facebook, I think in hyper casual, increasingly TikTok is being tested now as well, but not every game is TikTokable, depending on the trend. We've been playing around with different networks and looking at, for example, CVR on other networks to validate games, because a lot of these networks don't have auto CPI like Facebook does. So I think you can definitely look at that for hyper casual. But yeah, I agree with Anton, is that, you know, if you want to make a lot of profit, not revenue, if you want to make a lot of profit, there's no substitute for having a great CPI on Facebook.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. And also interesting point that maybe there's even some theory in actually making a game that won't be that so attractive so everyone wants to copy it, but might have a very perfect business model for what you want to achieve. And also, just when talking about idle games, I played your Hyper Cards game, John. It's very good. I like Pokemons a lot. I think very smart to
Thank you.
make something like that.
That's a great example, right? We've got a team that spent a lot of time on mid-core games with PvP mechanics. We didn't want to make a hyper casual game, so we were like, okay, with everything that we have and know, how do we bring that sort of really fun, you know, and obviously you had the trading trend with sort of fidget toys, but how do we make something with IEPs in it that's got $1 plus kind of LTV, and actually have a game that's going to be around hopefully for, you know, kind of 12, 18 months and, you know, make money for us and the studio, versus sort of hyper casual churn and burn. So yeah, it's perfectly doable, but, you know, as Ivan said earlier, you know, it's about the team, right? You need people that know how to do this stuff.
Sounds like there's no way around. You really need to be skilled in all the different areas, right? But what about you, Ivan, with the creatives? Have you, have you, I don't know, do you make the creatives yourself? I guess that's the first great question.
I just want to let Anton say whatever he has to say, because he's been struggling to get the word in.
Oh,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Thanks, Ivan. Thanks a lot. No, I just wanted to add one more point here, and I completely agree that it's not about quantity of the ads that you're making; it's about the quality of the ads. And another insight that I think it's going to be very valuable for the audience is it is very important to understand the value of the creative team of your publisher, or the internal creative team that you have in your development powerhouse. Is that creative team will sometimes help you define your product vision. What that means is your game can have different gameplay mechanics and maybe different settings within your game, like different color palettes or different levels that introduce different styles, etc. Maybe different characters that you play with, or maybe different gameplay mechanics. If you have a game that consists of different core mechanics divided by different levels, etc. And it's important to see what kind of ads the creative team produces, and then if your technology allows to compare the actual metrics for your product against various creatives that are being launched. Because sometimes we're seeing cases where a team launches a prototype and they have no idea for the first couple of weeks. They don't understand what their audience likes. They don't understand why they come to the game. They don't really understand why they stay in the game. And comparing these metrics against different creatives that are being launched as an output, like an external output, a creative output, for example, a creative team can take your game mechanics and then emphasize it by different techniques within the ad creatives, or add something on top, like create a like an intro, a live video intro to the game that emphasizes the mechanic or a setting that you're using for the game. And by looking at these different creatives, you can align a vision for your particular product, so you can better understand what it is, what works for the marketability in terms of the CPI, and then what works for the product metrics. For example, a certain audience will come from this particular video creative, and then you may see a better product metrics in the long term, because if it's not a mislead video, if a video emphasizes a particular gameplay mechanic, that means that your audience will stay for more of this mechanic in the future. And if you then tailor your mechanic or add more of that mechanic to your game, you will be able to improve your overall metrics and make the game more profitable in the long term.
I think that's super interesting, using the metrics to know more about the game and the player experiences and who to target and what to bring in. That's super interesting. For me as well, we just had another talk where it's the same. I think that can be, maybe I'm wondering if that will be a trend of having more technology tools like that in the future, also for smaller developers. Because I mean, I would guess you used a lot of time at SayGames on building a perfect system that helps you having the technology to track all of these things. What about you, Ivan, at your place? Is that the creatives? Is that something? Are you working with them yourselves, and do you use them the same way to like know more about the player behavior?
Yeah, so we're using them in a similar way. So for the game, for example, for the game Stealth Master, which is our probably main title when it comes to hyper casual right now, we're also using it as a way of a game design tool. So before actually introducing the feature in a game, we would rather test it and see whether it shows a good potential. And then if it does, then we will introduce it in the game. So it definitely helps to shorten the development times, and we can test several ideas simultaneously, right? On the other hand, for tank slot, we're doing everything we're doing in house. We're doing in a similar manner. So we're also testing some ideas for the game design. And then obviously we're using like global trends, and I don't know, we've recently launched a couple of quite good creatives with the Squid Game features in it. So yeah, and the problem with creatives right now is that and the reason why you have to do hundreds of them is because unfortunately they right now burn out really fast. So if in the past you can find a really like a really great working creative and keep working with it for like half a year and like keep growing the campaign, now is no longer the case. First of all, as soon as the creative is a top performer, all the competitive studios will know about it, because there's a lot of tools on the market that will tell them, and they will basically make the same version of it, and your metrics from these creatives will definitely go down. So it will no longer be the top performer for you only, and which is why you have to keep doing it and keep doing it. So currently our target is to have 10 creative designers. We currently have 8, I think, and as of now we're only working towards tank slot, and some things we're doing for stealth master as well, because, well, as Anton said, they're like quite busy with everything in it, and we're only making the creatives for stealth masters that we want to test as the game design ideas, not just the marketing ones. Well, yeah, that's probably it.
That's super interesting. So, and I think that it's probably also a great point, right? That we cannot forget everything we already learned before about speed and optimizing TPIs and everything. We just also need to consider that the business model might change a little bit, and the monetization and the way we see the whole business model of changed a bit. But I guess it sounds good, right? If CPIs can still be sort of low, right, and the LTV goes up a bit, then it sounds like the margin becomes bigger, which is a greater, right? It's good. But maybe in the end we should just have Samy, should we go like a quick round and ask what do you think the new trend will be then after? Like, how do you see the market developing from now and forward? If you could do it short, even though it's a big question.
That's the $1 million question, of course. I guess we like, if we are speaking about traditional or hyper casual, stacking has been around for 1 year. It evolved from just stacking bricks to character stacking, character evolution. I guess we are now somewhere across choice making and characters evolution. And I guess this, as an ID, as a marketable ID, remains very powerful to give the choice to the players to evolve in the direction they want to. For now, it's really simple, really binary, but I wouldn't be surprised if it continued to evolve and if it was, still one of the main trends that we could see in the future.
Interesting.
Short
Okay,
enough?
exciting for you. Yeah. What about you, John?
I think you see a few things. I think for hyper casual, as I said, you're just going to have more consolidation. So I'm waiting for 2 new deals to be announced. So that the big 4 or 5 publishers are going to get bigger through acquiring more studios content to enable them just to keep this volume game going. I think, as we've discussed, I think I'm really excited about these next wave of companies that are coming through, just making really great free-to-play games, whether it's more meta, more casual art style, and I'm just seeing some really great teams coming through that are taking great mechanics from hyper casual, maybe something they've learned from Merge, and just coming up with really nice innovation where maybe we have seen it before, we just forgot, but it just feels like something kind of new and exciting to play, and that's what we're all here for, right? To make great games.
Definitely. Okay, very interesting insight. Anton, what about you?
We think that the main trend is happening at the moment, and this is all the teams and publishers are now thinking more about the actual product metrics rather than the marketability and CPIs. So to be successful on the market, both the publishers and the developers will have to learn how to make deeper games, better games, bigger games, to stay ahead of the competition, and that will eventually create more teams that are capable of creating larger productions with better product metrics. That will help them learn about the actual analytics, on how to analyze all the data regarding the product and the monetization, and that will help them transition over to the in-app purchases. So and the trend is currently coming from the actual publishers, where some of them they produce an in-app based games internally. Some of ourselves, we do have a few games in soft launch and launched already, like in-app heavy games as we call them. So that we developed together with our studio partners. So the market is evolving in a way that the games are becoming more complicated, and as they become more complicated, that helps introduce more of an in-app purchase revenue than before.
I think that's some very interesting insights, and it sounds positive for developers of hyper casual, and especially when considering the amount of learning one can do and stuff, right? I also believe, just in along what you're saying, Anton, that you will also see more tools that will help developers publish or learn more about all the metrics and self-publish, right? Where, at least from my perspective right now, it is a big of a gap from working only with publishers to actually having to understand all of the publishing parts as well. But that was my takes on the future. I think more data tools to help developers self-publish. And I agree with what you're saying. What about you, Ivan? Should we have you in there? And unfortunately, I cannot see if there's any comments. I don't know if you guys can see it, like Q&A. So
no, I can't see any comments either.
Can write people after, right, if they have questions. But what about you, Ivan? Should we hear your thoughts about what's next?
It's really hard to be the last one to tell you the thoughts, because well, all of the guys previously sort of stole my ideas. No, I'm just kidding. So I actually think that one of the trends that is currently going, and it will keep going, is sort of like the cooperation, if I can put it this way. So it's exactly for the reason that there are so many tools on the market that actually reveal your game as soon as you start to test it. You now have to focus on making the game more sophisticated. You have to make a game of a way higher quality, because otherwise any super simple game which is based on trend can be cloned. And we all know studios that are only working in this manner, and we all hate them. I wouldn't say the names, but with that comes the challenge for the smaller studios, because if you want to make a successful game, if you want to make a successful prototype, you really have to think about choosing your partner. You really have to think about cooperating with someone, because you have to keep really like great processes, really great pipeline inside of the studio, some like really smart game development, maybe some sort of a mentor for you, because with that you will then be able to launch a game that is going to be out there for like a year, or maybe like even a couple of years, because you will be aiming for longer LTVs. And I think this is going to be the main trend. But still, obviously, the cloning and fast prototyping and fast launch of the games is still going to be there. It's never going to go away. But well, good luck with that, guys.
Yeah, and I agree, but especially as a Dane, right, from Scandinavia, and sometimes I use that hat because like it seems weird. Why is there no copyrights on anything? Why can we just had this huge design case in Denmark?
Oh, but there are. But there are so many cases which are going on the background. We just never see them. But there are so many strikes that are sent back and forth. You just don't see them.
And
but
also,
they're there.
Is the money also, you like the fine is very low, right? Like depending on what you could actually make. You're probably right, Ivan, because I think it's one of the only cases I heard about is like a long time ago where Volnykh, was it the wood game, wood turning or something like that, right? Where you heard there was a fine, but the fine was not that high compared to, like, we all know what you kind of can make in those games, right? But I guess that's another talk. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing your insights about the trends.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Riley.
Thanks a lot. See you guys.
I think we're out of time. Yeah.